Starshines, Tangent Spinner here, spinner of tangents and rants of random. I'm back again with the next chapter for WebMage, which would be chapter 4. What we left off at was we found out about what happened between Atropos and Ravirn, while Ravirn was unconscious and having a flashback, pretty much. Memory near? Would that be considered PTSD type thing? Because he was unconscious, having a memory of a terrifying encounter with his aunt who cursed him, because we found out that he was cursed like Apollo cursed Cassandra, the prophet. If y'all know Harry Potter, you know that story type shit, but so we found out that Atropos cursed Ravirn so that if he tried to speak against her, no one would believe him, no matter what, pretty much. She didn't even believe him. She thought it was hilarious. But yeah, no, so we left off there. Yeah, so we're starting off again, like I said, on chapter 4. So let's get into this. I woke covered in sweat. When I tried to sit up, the blinding pain in my knee reminded me of where I was. It also reminded me that my circumstances were worse than any nightmare. My meeting with my great aunt had been entirely real. Likewise, my attempt to sneak into her demons and steal the puppeteer crystal, and all that followed. The Cassandra Curse was one of the nastiest spells I'd ever encountered. Even Melchior hadn't believed me at first. I'd been forced to go into his command line and program him to believe me on the topic. And I hadn't been sure that would work before I actually did it. Every other kind of writing I'd tried had proven ineffective at circumventing the spell. The problem was that it focused on belief. I could tell anyone anything I wanted to, in any way I could imagine, and I'd tried quite a few of them, but I was simply unbelievable in every possible form of a communication. I couldn't break it either. Only the caster could do that. I was well and truly in the soup. I also had a bladder that felt about ready to explode. That, at least, I could do something about. Leaning over, I conveyed my distress to Melchior, who went to find our hostess. When he opened the door, dim yellow light flooded the room. It was low and domed like the inside of a yurt, the walls and ceiling lined with pictures cut from magazines. They were of all shapes and sizes, arranged without thought of straight lines. Color dominated rather than subject, dark reds and oranges for an effect something like brickwork laid by an insane mason. Yet it was somehow soothing. My futon was covered by a variety of patchwork quilts that smelled of a long stay in a dusty cedar chest. The floor was thick with rag rugs. Both bedding and rugs were of the same warm brick colors as the walls. The troll couldn't have been far away, because she arrived within a minute or two of Mel's departure. She wasn't much more than 3 feet tall, but she was nearly that wide. Her skin was the brown of a peeled apple left too long on the counter. Her wrinkled features had something of the same shrunken apple about them. Her forehead was low, her black eyes small, her cheeks round and lumpy. A heavy jaw dominated her face, with broad, upthrusting tusks that came to wicked points on either side of her wide nose. In short, she bore an uncomfortable resemblance to my great-aunt's familiar. But Melchior had assured me of her goodwill, and there was a strange nurturing quality about her. Someone from a gentler family than mine might even have called her grandmotherly. I found myself trusting her. She smiled graciously at me, exposing a row of gnarled teeth that had a distinctly carnivorous look to them. I smiled back. Stepping close, she lifted me as though I weighed nothing and carried me down a hall to the bathroom. In the process, I got a better idea of what the house under Hill looked like. All of the rooms were decorated in the same style as my sleeping room, only the colors and scrap material varied. Making use of the facilities was not something I enjoyed in the least. Suffice it to say that I needed help, and the procedure was painful. I was sweating and shaking when I returned to bed, but I was beginning to feel like I might survive. I wanted to talk with Alan, but she wasn't having any chit-chat. Instead, she gave me another drink of the cream and bananas mixture. Time skip. Boss, wake up! Melchior gently shook me. What? I grogged through a yawn. I just got a ping off the M-Web. Looks like it's back up. You mean it's been down all this time? Bugger. How long has it been? Something like 22 hours, subjective, but I don't know about real time. This world's way out of the mainstream of reality. Shall I query the fake clock? Yes, do that. Then why don't you check our mail? We'd need to do this very carefully. Melchior, initiate side door link. Execute. Executing, said the goblin, waiting for connection. There was a long pause. Connecting. Bandwidth very low. Real-time video and audio unavailable. Sending password as admin. Log on as admin confirmed. We're in. It's been 6 hours, 27 minutes, and 18 seconds objective since the M-Web went down. Powers and incarnations! My grandmother's going to have me stuffed and mounted. Melchior, secure mail. Execute. Executing. Finding mail hosts. Assessing hosts. Bypassing security. Downloading mail. The statements came in staccato bursts with long pauses between as he waited for data to move through the slow connection. The only thing in the queue is a note from Cerise. What's it say? I asked. You want it verbatim? No. What's the gist? She hopes you're still alive to get this. That's a sentiment I can endorse. What else? If you'd listen instead of running your mouth, you'd know. I waved an admonishing finger, but my heart wasn't really in it. I owed Melchior too much to treat him harshly. Not that I could let him know that, or I'd never get another jot of work out of him. He continued. She also wants you to check in and let her know what's happened as soon as possible. She sounds rather concerned for your welfare, though I can't imagine why. You're far more trouble than she deserves. Mel, you're opinionating again. Was I? Heavens, I hadn't noticed. I'd better be more careful. I sighed. Forget it. Just send a reply. Tell her I'm alive. Barely, said Mel. Hit the high points of where we are and how we got here. Tell her I owe her big time. Tag on some flowery language and send it. Compiling, he said, an abstracted look in his eye. Editing. Embellishing. Sandai! He jumped as though he'd been goosed. What's the matter, Mel? I don't know. I was accessing the SMTP server when I got a big jolt, like I'd stuck my finger in a socket. I'm not sure what He trailed off and pointed on the floor by the foot of my bed. I felt a shiver run down my spine. A pale blue light shone there as though from an overhead spotlight, the unmistakable signature of an incoming locust transfer. My first impulse was to run for it, but there was no way I was going to get an LTP link set up and gate out in time. Hell, in the shape I was in, I probably couldn't even get out of bed. I pulled my .45 from the holster Melchior had hung on the headboard. Like an image fading in on a piece of instamatic film, a figure appeared in the light. It carried a slender sword in its right hand and a diamond-shaped buckler in its left. Red and gold lamellar... What the fuck is a lamellar, guys? I have no idea. I'll have to Google it later. Lamellar armor covered it from head to toe, and for a second I thought Morik had returned from the dead. I pulled the trigger convulsively in the instant the light vanished, when the figure would be most vulnerable. But she, and I realized it was a woman then, her breastplate left little doubt, brought her left arm up with a speed that defied vision. Buckler met bullet, and the latter vanished as though it had never been. Before I could fire again, she was at the side of my bed. She flicked her blade, slapping the back of my gun hand. There was a flash at the contact, and my arm went numb. The pistol slid from my limp grasp, and the tip of her sword moved to hover above my left eye. It was impossible to focus on something that close, and I didn't really want to think about it in any case, so I shifted my attention to the woman. She was tall and slender, qualities emphasized by her armor. With this second look, I found myself wondering how I would ever have mistaken her for Morik. Pausing real quick. 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3. Boop. Besides the obvious clue of the breastplate, the helm was wrong. Instead of a samurai's demon face, the helm bore the classic T-slit of a Greek hoplite. Hoplite? The colors were wrong as well. Morik's primary was red, but dried blood, not flame. Even more of a contrast, his secondary was bruised blue, miles away from my visitor's cheery gold. You have me at a disadvantage, madam, I said, only because the agency of your own idiocy. The voice was muffled by the golden glass of the sealed T of her helm, but anger suffused it. Pardon? I go to all the trouble of pulling your sorry tail out from under the rocker, and what's the first thing you do? Check your email. Fool! Cerise? Of course it's Cerise, she said, seizing her sword. Do you think you'd still be alive if it wasn't... Honestly, I don't think you have the sense of a lobotomized tree sloth. She reached up and caught the crest of her helm, pulling it off. Her long, icy hair was braided and bound twice around her head in a coronet that looked elegant while providing an added layer of shock protection. She turned to my familiar, who had just appeared from somewhere in the vicinity of the headboard. I don't know how you put up with it, Mel. It's a trial, but who else is going to take care of him? Did you bring Shara? In response, she pulled a virulently purple laptop out of a compartment on the back of her armor. She set it on the floor, where it stretched and twisted into an equally purple webgoblin. Shara was built on a sort of exaggerated hourglass model, and when she moved, she swayed a great deal more than mere locomotion required. In appearance, she's a sort of miniature version of Mae West, except that her teeth are wickedly sharp and her hair tends to move on its own accord. As soon as her transformation was complete, she winked one violet eye at Mel and nodded for him to follow her into the corner. The pair scampered off to talk about whatever it was that familiars talk about, and Cerise returned her attention to me. Hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Alright, I'm going to read one more page, and then we're going to cut this one off into part 1, okay? Where was I? She asked. I believe you were dressing me down for blatant stupidity. Thank you, she said in a sweet contralto, and it was obvious she meant it. Then she proceeded to shoot me out in terms any drill sergeant would have been proud of. If you're ready to take a breather, I said when she ran down, I've got a couple questions and a request. What are they? First, how did you find me? She paused for a moment, as though weighing the words before speaking. Isn't it obvious? I embedded a virus in my message to you. It did a quick location scan when you downloaded it. When you went to send a reply, it hitched a ride on the carrier wave to tell me where it was. That didn't sound feasible, but who was I to argue with success? The rest was easy, she continued. Since you hadn't even bothered to set up the most rudimentary of wards, I'm frankly shocked that either tactic worked, but that just goes to illustrate my earlier point about you being a low-grade moron. At least you had the sense to shoot first and ask questions later when I arrived. Not that it would have helped if that was the best you could do. Oh, Ravirn. This last was said with a sort of gentle affection as she took a seat beside me on the low bed, pulling her gauntlets off, and she took my right hand between hers. What am I going to do with you? I could entertain a couple of thoughts on the subject, but they might be best discussed at a later time, as I'm currently somewhat incapacitated. Besides, I have other, more immediate concerns. For example, do you think anyone else could duplicate our performance? Absolutely not, she said. I wondered at her conviction. There was very few things one hacker can do that another can't replicate. Clearly, she knew something she didn't believe anyone else did. But it would have been both rude and futile to try and get her to reveal her whole card. She continued, I did a couple of watchdog programs staking out your email server, but they weren't exactly grade 1. I doubt they could have backtracked the link you used to access the mail queue. I tried that and got lost in a maze of subroutines. I'd really like to know how you did that. If you ask very sweetly, I might be willing to trade techniques, I replied. Melchior runs a heavy-duty virus scan on all incoming mail, and I'd love to know why he didn't catch yours. Perhaps he wasn't looking in the right place. I'll have to think about that. In the meantime, I still have a pending request. You do indeed. What is it? I'd like you to take a look at my injuries and see what you can do. You're better at healing magic than I am, and I'm feeling awfully vulnerable stuck here on my back. I'm sorry, she said, touching the bandage on my neck. I should have done that before I snarled at you. You do look a bit like a Rottweiler's favorite chew toy. She shook a finger admonishingly. That doesn't mean I shouldn't have said any of that. I just should have taken care of your injuries first. Let me get a bit more comfortable, and then I'll have a look. She quickly stripped off her armor and padding. Underneath she wore scarlet tights and a very thin gold tunic, neither of which did much to conceal her form at all. She was tall and slender, with long legs and high, small breasts. Her eyes were a blue that was simultaneously quite pale and shockingly intense. She unbraided her hair and let it fall in long white cascade, almost covering ears that were slightly more finely pointed than mine. Her nose was small and straight, with just a hint of an upturn at the tip. High cheekbones and a pointed jaw framed a generous mouth and full lips. Gods, but I hate armor, she said, stretching lithely. It was worth watching. It always feels like a poorly fitted underwire bra worn over the whole body. She grinned. But that probably doesn't mean much to you, does it? I shrugged. Of course not. She dropped onto the bed next to me. I'm going to start now. Don't move. I'm going to stop now. So now we get a bit more serious. Obviously, it's really clear already that she's already a love interest, or at least a sex interest. But, yeah, no, and she's also acting a little bit shady with that. Oh, yeah, no, I totally hacked you and piggybacked into your system thing. And he's probably a bit distracted through pain, and oh my god, it's someone nice who's here to see me. But yeah, no. So that's it for part 1 of chapter 4. I'll see you guys for part 2. Tangent's gonna spin on out. Like, comment, subscribe. Y'all know how YouTube works. So, like I said, Tangent spinning on out. Remember, you guys, you're all my sunshines. Alright, Tangent out.